We're live on a Wednesday. This is the last Wednesday in July for those of you that keep track of that. And there's many, a very silent majority of those of you who keep in contact with the last Wednesday in July. It sounds like the beginning of a movie or something of that nature. Look, I want to talk today about power. Significantly powerful, and specifically the Kuiper family, more like the Kuiper brothers in the Bay Area TV sports world. And I'm going to say specifically the Giants. And now I'm going to let you all decide whether you think that they're potentially or even presently, if there's a problem here. I'll let you decide for this, but I can tell you that it's significant. Well, what am I talking about? Of course, and that has to do with the Kuiper brothers, Dwayne Kuiper, Glenn Kuiper, Jeff Kuiper. They all have a connection to the Giants. Used to have a connection to the A's, but we'll center on the Giants, and then we'll expand it across the cable landscape here and even beyond. But let's start with the upfront issues. Okay, just kind of put out the shall we say, the napkins and the forks and the knives and all that. Okay, and set the dinner table. All right, you have Dwayne Kuiper, former player. Of course, Giants player, becomes broadcaster, very popular, etc. Works alongside Mike Kruko, does a weekly spot on KNBR, and also obviously is the play-by-play apparatus figure for the cable broadcasts for the Giants. Then you have brother Glenn Kuiper. And Glenn Kuiper, those of you that don't remember the story, I'll kind of go into it, make it kind of quicken it up a pace or two. Glenn Kuiper was, of course, the broadcaster, cable play-by-play guy for the Oakland A's when they were in the Oakland area, and was subsequently fired a little over 2 years ago, well, May of 2023 to be exact, when he uttered, really for the second, at least the second time, which many of you don't know, the N-word, a racial slur, and paid the price. Okay, now I'm going to get to part of the power situation involving the Kuiper brothers, make a point or two or three or four in a second here. So keep that in mind about Glenn Kuiper. And then you have the least of public, to some degree, of the Kuiper brothers, but significantly powerful enough, is the youngest of the brothers, Jeff Kuiper, who is the director for the Giants cable broadcasts on NBC Sports Bay Area. Again, part of the Kuiper lineage. Dwayne Kuiper is actively behind the scenes, part of the apparatus that is trying very diligently and very, again, powerfully to get his brother that was fired from the Oakland A's, technically NBC Sports Bay Area, but, they were both privy to it, agreed to it. Trying to get his brother, Glenn, back into the domain. Now, excuse me a little bit when I'm way too many Kuipers here. So I'm trying to keep straight the Jeff, Dwayne, Glenn conundrum. So occasionally I might stumble. Just keep in mind, I'm not stumbling. I'm just forming a for the record excuse. There's a lot of Kuipers, but I'll get to it. Trust me. So brother Dwayne is trying to use the might that he does possess to get brother Glenn Kuiper back into the domain. This, despite the fact of a very well publicized N word, where he wasn't real N word usage by Glenn Kuiper. Oh, he's said a few times that he's apologized, he regrets it, but nothing like the commotion that it has caused. And folks, this was not the first time. This is the second time this happened. There was a incident at spring training a few years back, and that kind of a thing doesn't get a lot of play. Geez, I wonder why. So Dwayne is trying to help his brother, which on the surface sounds fine until you go into the machinations of what is taking place. And it involves not just the TV side. It involves the Giants. It involves the KNBR folks. It involves several Bay Area sports personalities like Marty Lurie, like Brian Murphy, like some KNBR Cumulus execs. They've all been, Larry Bear himself, still the face of the Giants, at least on the business side, although Larry Bear, aka Big Bird, is losing a lot of his preeminence at the Giants. But nevertheless, the Giants are in on all of this kind of deal of trying to get Glenn Kuiper back into the fold. And how are they doing this? Well, they're floating basically a trial balloon that they floated for the past almost year now, where Glenn Kuiper's been doing a bit with Marty Lurie on KNBR. He's been down on the field at Giants games, very, very visible. Had a very, very sympathetic article in the San Francisco Chronicle about a year ago by Susan Slusser. She covers the Giants more like a cheerleader, but that's another story altogether. And she giggles a lot, so that makes her a favorite, I guess. Critical analysis, very little. But anyway, she did an article on Glenn Kuiper. It was very sympathetic and, well, taking part in this. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, keep that in your head for a second. Jeff Kuiper is the director for the Giants telecast on NBC Sports Bay Area. Now, there's a connection there, too. Kuiper, not only does he direct the home games, but the away games also. So you have Kuiper DNA everywhere, including Larry Bear, including at the top of the Giants apparatus, the power structure. And even though Larry Bear's power has been lessened extremely, and you're not going to get any of this, folks, in the Chronicle. They're part of the vast media empire that is kind of toe and toe with the Giants. They don't want to piss the Giants off. Why? Because they're business partners. And they go out of their way to maintain the love that they all have for one another. And that's kind of the situation with the Kuiper brothers. All right. It was reported by me a couple of years ago that Dwayne Kuiper was seriously considering retiring. He was. He had a health crisis with his cancer diagnosis. He'd been working long and hard and very arduous. Team had been very successful. They won 3 world championships. Him and Mike Krukow, part of the broadcast end of it, along with John Miller. So, Dwayne Kuiper has had a good ride, a real good ride. He told friends, specifically a guy by the name of Mario Alioto, at one of these big to-do dinners, the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame dinner, that he was ready to go. All of a sudden, you have the Glenn Kuiper incident where he gets fired. Basically gets, I don't want to say blackballed. That would be somewhat, inappropriate, but I'm not using it in the context to which it's intended. and it's nothing to do with race. It's just the fact of trying to get this specific person out of the domain because of what he said. And he hasn't exactly been 100% remorseful, but I'll get into that later on. Nevertheless, Dwayne Kuiper had a change of heart. And because of his brother's plight, and I'm talking about brother Glenn, wanting to help brother Glenn get back into the fold, perhaps even work for the Giants as he himself retires soon one day, even though he gets paid a lot of money. And he and Mike Krukow are part of the duo that has been mentioned as a possibility of placement in the Baseball Hall of Fame broadcast wing. That didn't happen, but it probably will happen someday. Anyway, Dwayne Kuiper had a change of heart, wants to help his brother. He has been working behind the scenes to get PR articles and radio bits, and shall we say, during the season, they just had the other week or two ago, there was an affair at the Gotham Club, a very exclusive bar, got a little mosh place at Oracle Park. And they did a function, had a whole bunch of people there. Some of the higher ups in the team were there. The broadcasters were there. Not all of them, but they were there. And oh, by the way, yes, Glenn Kuiper was there along with brother Dwayne Kuiper. And there was a lot of schmoozing with the powers that be. Hey, you know what? Part of the schmoozing involved getting Glenn back into the game, so to speak. Now, whether or not that transpires, who knows? My point is, folks, the Kuiper power is very, very strong, and it involves several people, mostly, again, the Giants, Larry Baer, Greg Johnson, who is the son of the actual owner, Charles Johnson, but he does most of the day-to-day operations and is responsible for the Giants' business side. You know, he and Larry Baer. Now, as I said, Larry Baer's role has been diminished. When they got that big trade, remember that? They had the big press conference at the park about 6 weeks ago with the new guy, the big kahuna, who hasn't been that big thus far. You know, Mr. Devers, Rafael Devers. Larry Baer significantly was not up on the dice. He was in the off-camera area. Larry loves cameras. He wasn't up on the stage. He was in the audience, sitting in the front row, but he wasn't on the camera. In any event, does Larry still have a prominent role on the business side of the Giants? Absolutely, he does. And believe you me, he's been nudged and schmoozed and talked to by, I'm sure, Dwayne Kuiper. Larry, let's try to get Glenn into the fold here. Okay, folks? If you listen to the radio, KNBR does a bit with Marty Lurie, does brother Glenn Kuiper. I wish Marty would have asked Glenn, hey, Glenn, let's set the record straight. What about that incident back in May of 2023 when you used that slur? You said it was an accident. Of course, it took you more than an hour to come back on the air and apologize. I'm sure you knew, and I'm talking out loud here. Marty could have settled this once and for all, good or bad. What's the deal, Glenn? And Glenn has gone on various shows, some of them online here at YouTube, other places, to kind of hem and haw without 100% saying something to the effect of, and I'm just going to paraphrase something that I would have said. Folks, I made an accidental slur. It was an accident. I by no means intended to say what came out. I apologize. Could have been something at least. He didn't do that. At least explain yourself, try to, and be compelling, be somewhat remorseful. He's gone on and said a few apologies, but nothing forceful, nothing, which appeared to be like, hey, this guy just screwed up and, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Oh, benefit of the doubt would have been absolutely something expected. But he said it before. Didn't get much play because it wasn't on a national TV or cable existence. It didn't have the play that it should have had, which would have explained why a lot of people, not a lot, but moi, have sort of said, he doesn't sound very remorseful. So what happened in May of 23, that night in Kansas City, when he used the N word, I hate that phrase. It's so stupid. But the word itself, it's so repugnant and all that. I don't want to use it. So I'll say the N word. And got some quasi support from various members of the African American black community, etc. But there are a lot of people that are still very skeptical. All right, back to the Kuiper power machine. They've been working behind the scenes, folks, to try to get Glenn Kuiper back again into the fold. And every arena, every place, social functions, political functions, broadcast functions, you don't know until now the machinations of what has taken place to try to help Glenn Kuiper get back into the fold. And Dwayne Kuiper's been at the forefront along with Jeff Kuiper and any other Kuiper. Now, mind you, the Kuipers grew up, born and raised in Racine, Wisconsin. Okay? Not exactly a hub of, shall we say, cosmopolitan virtues and wares and all that. I just bring that up with you in the background as a sort of, just a factual thing, kind of a deal. Nevertheless, the Giants, and of course, they're not going to say anything because the Chronicle doesn't have any true, shall we say, journalists. They don't inquire. They have very, very nice, willing media writers like Susan Slusser, who doesn't inquire, who didn't formally and actually go after Glenn Kuiper and say, Glenn, you got to be a little bit more upfront. Tell us, your deal. What was the deal on that? She didn't. It was just a big article about a lot of fluff, and it was lighthearted at best. But the fact of the matter is, she was nudged to do the article by Glenn Kuiper. And, oh, by the way, Dwayne Kuiper. Thus, you have this very sympathetic article. And, oh, by the way, Marty Lurie. And I like Marty. But there are things that he does, or in this case, doesn't do, that I don't like and needs to be accounted for and explained. Your San Francisco media, which is marginalized at best, doesn't ask questions. You've got a lot of sympathetic putzes out there, including a guy who used to work at 95.7 The Game in the afternoon until he was terminated. Used to work at KNBR, Damon Bruce, who took part in the PR campaign, although nobody watches Damon Bruce's show, so that did little effect to the good of Glenn Kuiper, although he went on and Marty Lurie talked about it and talked about his remorsefulness, of which there is none. There's just this kind of, okay, I'm sorry, now what? Get me back onto the broadcast mode. That's neither here nor there. I just present it as the fact that all these various places that he's been doing this PR campaign orchestrated by the Kuiper brothers. And it goes beyond that. It goes to the heart and soul of the Giants, how they feel about their broadcasters, the amount of power that they possess, the amount of power they possess at NBC Sports Bay Area, the treatment, the scheduling, all of the above. Is there issues that go along with that? I think so. As the power that all these Kuiper brothers possess, is it problematic for NBC, for the Giants? They're all in bed together, so to speak. So it's all kind of a kumbaya, love, say love kind of a deal until, as they say, the power corrupts. Now, I'm not indicating there's anything of corrupt nature here. I'm going to let you figure that out and see if you think that's a potential, if not already, an issue, as I seem to think there is. Okay. I just wanted to point out a very significant issue, a very significant part of the domain that exists within the Bay Area elite, the media fortress that is on the baseball forefront involving the Giants, NBC Bay Area, and let you decipher. That's why I'm here. Things that are not brought out by the Chronicle or the SF Standard and their good journalist that they hired away from the Chronicle, John Shea. And I would say, and I know John watches me and follows me on Twitter. John, you yourself, I know you covered the Kuiper slur. Have you asked Glenn or Dwayne about this PR tactic to get so many Kuipers, to get Glenn Kuiper back into the fold? Just curious. So any event, I bring that up, and I hope you guys kind of consider it and voice your opinion. You can agree with me, disagree, be in the middle, that kind of a thing. But that's why we're here. Thank you for watching. It is Wednesday, a gray Wednesday, at least here near the coast. But you guys have a wonderful day. And yes, of course, see you later, alligator.